Hey, good morning everybody. It's Karis with the Modern Sewist here to talk about our foot fetish, foot of the month. And that is going to be the number 83 circular embroidery attachment. So it's actually not a foot. It attaches to the bed of your machine. This happens to be one of my all-time favorite attachments. It's the very first one that I used that was not a foot. And so a couple of samples that I have, this handbag that I made, the design uses this attachment. And another really cool thing that you can do is you can make applique circles. So you can use this foot to make perfect circles. And I'm going to show you how to do that today as well. All right, so when you get the attachment, what you're going to find in the box is the actual attachment itself. It's a metal bracket of sorts. It has a pin with a safety piece of rubber. I call it the pin of death or the post because it's extremely sharp. This is where your fabric goes over, so you don't ever want to lose this little rubber piece. If you do lose it, grab yourself an eraser, something to make sure that that's very safe. This post slides, and where you have it here is going to be indicative of the diameter of your circle. I don't have exact measurements, but I believe that the smallest circle that you can make is about 1 7/8 in diameter. And if you pull this all the way out to the side, you've got about 11 inches of diameter in your circle. So the other piece that comes with this is your set screw. You get 2 of them, so technically you could lose one. Not that I recommend that. And then of course you get your little screwdriver. So the attachment goes on 2 different ways on the bed of your machine, depending on whether you want your fabric to go in a clockwise motion or a counterclockwise motion. So you've got 2 holes on the attachment, and that's where it's going to be applied to the bed of your machine, to the free arm. I recommend, if you've got a sew steady table, to use that. If not, certainly your extension table. You don't want to use this just on a free arm. So you can have your post to the left of your needle, and it would secure just to the right of your stitch plate. Or you can switch that around and it is behind your presser foot and also adheres to the very same hole, or you can do one over. You just want to make sure that your presser foot does not land on top of your attachment. So I'm going to attach mine to the left. Okay. Today I'm sewing on a Tula Pink BERNINA 770, so I've got a 9mm stitch width. And I really love that because using this attachment is all about using the decorative stitches. So I have attached my attachment to my free arm. I'm gonna go ahead and put my screwdriver away here. I use 1 of 2 feet depending on what my task at hand is. If I'm just sewing, so for now I'm going to put the 1C away and I'm going to use my 20D. So a couple of tips. First of all, let's talk about why this is called the circular embroidery attachment, because there's no embroidery module required. You can do this on your domestic BERNINA. You do not need to have the embroidery module. You can do this on older machines as well. It doesn't have to be the brand new Tula Pink, although I get extra stitches with that, you know that, right? So you want to use stabilizer just like you would with embroidery. Again, whenever we use decorative stitches, particularly the satin stitches that are super dense, you don't want your fabric to become puckered, because when it becomes puckered, it doesn't look so good. So when I'm doing my projects using this attachment, I am going to be using my stabilizer, just like I would as though I were embroidering. So for example, I did a little stitch out. If you can see this up close, you can see that I have two circles here. One is very puckered and one is nice and smooth and flat. I used some Shapeflex 101 just to stabilize the fabric itself so it doesn't pull on a bias. And when I stitch out in the circle without any stabilizer, I get those puckers. So on the back, you can see that on the puckery one, all that's here is the Shapeflex. On the smooth and flat one, you can see that I have stabilizer. In this instance, I have used Ultra Clean and Tear, and I use the medium weight, and I've used 2 layers. If you've got heavy weight, for this fabric, you would only need 1 layer of your stabilizer. And I love the tearaway because it is easy to take out if I want to do that, or I can leave it in on the project if I so choose. With that in mind, the other tip is to hoop your fabric. Now, we're not using our Bernina embroidery hoops because they are oval or squarish. We want to use our round embroidery hoops, just the wooden ones that you can pick up at your favorite needlepoint embroidery yarn store house. I've got a circular one that I use for my hand stitching. The reason we want to use this is it keeps our fabric nice and tight. That's tip number 2. And next, you want to make sure that you use a consistent speed. So when I'm using my attachment, I go at about half speed, and I don't use my presser foot. I actually use my on-off button on the face of my machine so that I don't have to worry about my foot moving, because I tend to hold my breath when I sew, and when I hold my breath and then all of a sudden I finally do breathe, my foot moves, and I want to keep consistent stitching. Again, just like you would if you were embroidering. The embroidery module keeps a consistent speed, which keeps a consistent stitch. So the first thing that I'm going to do is, before I even put my presser foot on, I'm going to take off my safety rubber tip. I'm going to hold it so I don't drop it and lose it. And I'm just going to place my embroidery hoop over it, and then I'm going to press my fabric down over that needle or that post, and then I'm going to put my safety tip back over it. Then I can slide, as you can see, I can slide my hoop. Obviously, I'm not going to stitch on the outside of the hoop. I'm going to stitch on the inside. Now I'm going to go ahead and put my presser foot on. I like to start with a stitch close to the center. Go ahead and put my 20D foot on. I'm going to engage my dual feed because I have that. And I right now am going to choose a number 6 triple stitch because I like the way that looks. And it's a great one to start because it does make a perfect circle every time. So the fourth thing you want to do, and again, this is reminiscent of using your embroidery module, is to bring your bobbin thread up. So I'm going to go needle down, needle up, and I'm going to see my bobbin thread, and I'm going to pull that so I can see the tails, and I'm going to slide that underneath, and now I'm just going to press go. So tip number 5 is that I also use the tack down stitch at the start and at the stop. So when I cut my threads, it's automatically going to do a tack in place stitch. Now I can move that out of the way and I can trim my tails. And then I'm going to advance my hoop out, and then I'm going to choose another stitch. And since I'm on a Tula Pink machine, I think it's only appropriate to choose a Tula Pink stitch. So let's see what I have here. Ooh, I like branches. Ooh, I like this one. Okie dokie. I'm going to bring my bobbin thread up again. Up we go. Pull it up, underneath, and off to the races we go. Whee! And that turned out perfectly. So I'm going to take this off. You guys get the gist of what I'm doing here. And I actually need to take my presser foot off because it's too tall for that. So look at how nice that turned out.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Oh, I also wanted to mention that this works great on cork. I love embroidering cork fabric. The nice thing about the cork that we get here from Portugal is it's a really nice weight, super supple, and it's also fabric backed. I have not had to use stabilizer on the back of this. My next trick is going to be making my applique circles. I have 3 pieces here that I'm going to layer to make my applique circle. I'm going to start with my printed fabric, all right? So the sandwich that I'm going to make is fabric, stabilizer, and fusible web. So I'm using, again, the Shapeflex 101. That's fusible on one side. So these are my 3 layers. My stabilizer is going to be in the center. So I'm going to lay my stabilizer down first. I'm going to take my fabric, printed side down. So my wrong side is up. I'm going to turn that over so my stabilizer is showing again. And then I'm going to take my Shapeflex, my interfacing, and it's going to be nubby or fusible side down. So it's going to be the smooth side up. And you can see that all of my circles are cut at the same size. All right, so then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my circles and I'm going to fold them in half and give it a finger press. And then I'm going to fold it in half the other way and give it a finger press. I'm just trying to find the center of the circle. And then I like to have the fabric side up. And then I'm going to just position the post right in the center and push my little sandwich over that. And then I'm going to put the little rubber tip over it.
So we're looking at the wrong side of the printed fabric right now.
Correct. Wrong side of the printed fabric. Then I've got my stabilizer in the middle. And again, this is my Ultra Clean and Tear, and I'm just using 1 piece of the medium weight. And then I've got my Shapeflex 101 with the nubby side up. That's the fusible side, the gluey side, okay? And then I'm going to take right now I've got my 1C foot on. Again, it's wider, so it's going to sit on my fabric. I want my fabric to be fully under the presser foot. So I'm just going to use a straight stitch, and I turn my width down to about 2 millimeters. I want it to be a pretty short stitch. And I will use my foot pedal for this. I do not need to bring my bobbin thread up because it's just a straight stitch. And I don't bother using an embroidery hoop for this either. I do go at a slower speed. I just want to feed it. You know, I just make sure that it stays flat as I'm going around. We are almost there. All right, and I'm gonna cut it and then it will tack my stitches again. Then I'm going to take that off, put that little guy back on, trim my tails. And then if I want, obviously I should trim my seam allowance. And I really don't bother cutting notches. Okie doke. So there we go. Seam allowance, trimmed. Okay, so then I'm going to go to the back side where I've got my Shapeflex 101, and I'm going to pull this little piece out, and I'm going to cut a little X in the center. There we go. And then I'm going to pull my circle through. And you don't have to be too gentle because then we're going to just rip off that stabilizer. You've got to have the stabilizer in there though. So then we're going to tear that off and get that nice and close to the edge. And so now I've got a perfect applique circle. Just pushing out my corners there. And with the fusible on the back side, I can then just fuse that down to my project. So there's my little circle guy. Another great feature of the number 83 Circular Embroidery Attachment. Hope you've learned something today. And if you're interested in this foot and you're part of our Foot Fetish Club, you can give us a call or lob us an email at info@themodernsew.ist, and you will get your Foot Fetish member discount. Thanks so much.